Today I'll be explaining the concept of war, so catch up quickly. We know war usually happens between two parties, and we know it happens in a secluded area. We know one of the party gets piped in the fight, and then sometimes the other just loves a sneak attack and attacks from the back. As disastrous as war can be, it gives rise to new things, don't you agree? Sometimes the result can be beautiful, and other times it can be disastrous. Don't mind me, I'm just trying to sound as neutral as possible without these lewd visuals flashing on screen. And then there's a saying, every man is born with a weakness that must bring him to his knees. Not Aaron though, another protagonist. But our protagonist, Tigre, is subjected to the mercy of a war maiden with huge coconuts. No, I don't mean that type of war that goes down behind closed curtains. I mean actual gut penetration and some heavy breathing. The story begins when this guy pledges his life to this girl. Can't blame him though. Looking at the size of those bouncing castles, I would submit mine too. Now, it's not just the size of her milk factories that makes her special. Eleonora, but in this context, Ellen is a Vanadis, aka War Maiden. Now, the War Maidens are a total 7 in number, and they are females who reign over 7 territories in Zhcted. War Maidens are even more special because they are trained soldiers who wield a powerful weapon from the dragon. Now imagine the devastating power these women take into every battlefield they step into. Even at that, there are nations like Brune who choose to sacrifice their armies and go head-to-head against the War Maidens of Zhcted. Before getting hit and run by Ellen the War Maiden, Tigre was nothing short of a busboy. From our war context earlier, let's say the busboy is the guy who peeps the ungodly act, but never gets any action. And then afterward, he's also ordered to clean the body on the battlefield. For someone born as a count's son, Tigre pretty much acts like a nobody, even when warriors wield weapons like swords or spears for penetration. Tigre's go-to weapon is a bow. Best believe he gets bullied for being a marksman at the slightest chance. Going further, Tigre is revealed to be someone who can't stand hostility, but he's definitely standing on this business. We get to see him in a scene where he almost reacts to certain warriors making a jest of victims under Duke Theonthir's wicked rulership. Not sure how he planned to confront them when he possesses no ounce of killer strength. Luckily, he is called to order by Mashas, who tells him to glue his ass back on the seat. This revelation indicates that the Brunes are not just at war with the Zhcted, they also happen to have an internal crisis. In other words, the Brunes were cooking the wrong steak and sailing the wrong boat. Immediately, the scene shifts into a really awkward one. In this anime, guys, there are tits, and there are tits. This time around, and in the present, Ellen's attendant, Lim, tries to wake Tigre from his slumber. But not in the normal way. She uses her sword to yank his mouth open. I'm sorry, but it's giving all shades of BDSM. And that's alright, cause if her tits jiggle like that at the slightest movement, then I'll pledge my soul to her. What comes as a shock to Lim is that Tigre sleeps soundly even as a prisoner in Zhcted. Blood sleeps like he's got zero worries in the world. I think now we understand why she shoved her sword in his mouth to wake him up. But this makes me wonder what else she'd do to shove in there next. That aside, it's revealed that when Ellen took in Tigre as her prisoner, she meant serious business with it. Ellen now demands a ransom from the Brune Empire in exchange for Tigre's freedom. Deep down, I believe it's a facade though. Ellen has no intention of returning this guy, because why ask for a ransom that's 3 times the revenue of Brune? It's not like Tigre is the king's son or anything. A very thin line distinguishes him from being a useless warrior. So the Brune Empire has 50 days to provide the ransom, or they can risk losing another warrior after previously losing 250,000 men in the war against Zhcted. Later on, Tigre is taken to the archery ground to see what he's made of. Anyone else ready to be disappointed? I see, so the whole room is. As expected, Tigre misses the 2 shots he takes, giving his audience something to laugh about, but it's not over yet. Turns out it was all a bluff. Or rather, a moment for Tigre to familiarize with the weapon given to him. Nobody would dare to go after a war maiden, but there's just one dumb fuck who thinks it's him. We get to see Tigre's full potential when he shoots at a man in a cloak who tries to assassinate Ellen. To the disappointment and dismay of a mocking audience, the arrow hits exactly where it's meant to, even at an unbelievable distance. Nice shot, Tigre, I never doubted you for a second. Moreover, it's revealed that there was a cooking plot against him. Some mocking soldiers, specifically led by Rurik, intentionally altered the bow given to Tigre. Their reasons are simple: to publicly humiliate and ridicule him. But why go to such lengths for a prisoner? Turns out there's been ongoing rumors about a love relationship between the prisoner and his jailer, referring to Tigre and Ellen, of course. Ellen simply explains that she intends to debunk these rumors by proving Tigre is a competent and skilled marksman, which makes sense that the archery practice was set up and then sabotaged by these same soldiers. Safe to say, Tigre has what this generation calls haters.
You're not very bright, are you?
This sum of events also comes with Ellen's confession, and when she reveals the reason she took Tigre as a prisoner, turns out it's because she finds him entertaining. It's simple as that. In other words, you wouldn't need to do too much to get the girl. Just be an anime protagonist who tries to kill the hottest female in the first scene, and it backfires. I never advised you on how to pull females. That aside, Ellen also reveals that Lim's supposed to sword act on Tigre was in fact attempted murder, and not some BDSM shit. That's how this recap would have ended in episode 1, and I didn't notice because I'm just a naughty, perverted degenerate. Anyway, Lim's irk at Tigre remains on the foundation that one of his arrows killed her beloved horse on the battlefield. As the series proceeds, Rurik decides he'd rather follow greatness than scheme against it. He apologizes for his little scheme against Tigre. Not only that, he also thanks him for interceding in the altered bow case. Ellen was ready to sever his head for Tigre's sake, but right now Rurik has to live with the punishment of a bald head that anyone would easily mistake for the greatest mirror to ever exist. On that note, Tigre's stay as a prisoner seems to be going smoothly. For the best part of it, he's allowed to wander the premises without chains. He also gets an exhilarating view of Ellen in the best form any lucky degenerate could ask for. What a lucky bastard. However, all the hell is about to break loose when Tigre approaches the gates to demand his freedom. So this is how the story goes. Tigre is made Lord of Alsace after the passing of his father, but somehow Duke Thénardier holds resentment over Alsace and sends about 3,000 men to raid the town. Just putting this out there that the Thénardier family aren't fans of Vorn Tigre. Matter of fact, the Duke's son Zion is always seen at the forefront of his bully. You'll know shit just got serious when Thénardier appoints Zion to lead troops and dragons against Alsace. Now there's no difference between the scenario and giving a fully stacked credit card to a child to go shopping. I bet Zion thinks having dragons under his command is a huge flex. Also, that's a summary of why Tigre suddenly demands his freedom after being informed of the incoming attack at Alsace. Ellen's take? She immediately refuses. In her words, Tigre is not only her prisoner, but he's rather foolish. Just because he's not locked up in a cell, Blood thinks he's some kind of hotshot. That aside, a single man going against an army of 3,000 is foolishness. The situation gets even more extreme when Ellen chooses to give Tigre a memorable death of dying by her sword, just so his blood isn't wasted on the battlefield. In the end, Tigre realizes what game Ellen is playing. He takes the reasonable route and seeks to lend her troops. Not gonna lie, the request is daring and her response is priceless. All is fair in love and war, but nothing comes free without a price. Ellen demands the whole Alsace in exchange for her alliance in battle. Left with no choice, Tigre agrees to this, but on the condition that she rules fairly. With that conclusion, Ellen leads 1,000 troops to intercept the supposed attack on Alsace. As the story proceeds, more of Thénardier's scheme comes to light. Turns out that Alsace is a remote region in the Brune Empire, and therefore it's a piece of cake to conquer. However, Thénardier's eyes are set on the king's throne ever since his successor died in the fight against the Zhcted army. Back at Alsace, measures are underway for the protection of the citizens and their properties, along with Tigre's favorite maiden fangirl, Taida, who waits eagerly for his return. Soon, Zion's soldiers squirm the city, trampling on everything that crosses their paths. Only problem is that there are no people in the city, so it's not exactly fun for these savages. Soon, news about the residents' hideout gets to Zion. Turns out the people took refuge in the temple. The rules are as simple as they come. You can destroy anything, even the Lord's house, but nobody touches the temple if they don't want to awaken a nationwide riot. Zion's frustration leads him to the Vorn's mansion, where he meets Tida eagerly waiting for her master's return. Having an enemy coming for her master and childhood friend unleashes every hidden emotion in Tida that she just explodes. In response to this, Zion shows how ruthless he can be with the sword, and it soon turns into a duck and goose chase. In all my life of watching anime, I've seen a gun versus sword fight and a spear versus sword fight, but I've never seen a dagger versus a sword. I don't know what logic this works in Tida's books, but she soon realizes the consequences. And more consequences. Now let's not act like y'all didn't know this guy's a wholesome degenerate. As much as I'm disgusted by this scene and want to shift to a commercial break, damn, I'm sorry dear Tida, I wasn't familiar with your game. And then here comes the best part. Tigre arrives just in time to spoil the fun, and also burst a bloody hole through his palm. Guys, the scene right here went crazy, as well as this scene. Nice save from Eleonora and Tigre, by the way. Tida is well aware of how much danger she puts herself in by staying behind. It's also revealed that the item she tried to protect is a customized ancestral bow left by Tigre's father. Undoubtedly, this is the perfect time to wield it. I cannot fathom the power this bow possesses, and I cannot wait to see it in action. In the next scene, I realize that I might have spoken way too soon. For all we know, 300 enemy soldiers fell during the fight. Others are speculated to have joined the main troop and are probably reorganizing another attack. The intel seems valid because Zion was also lucky enough to escape. I don't know how that happened, and don't ask me, knowing fully well that they can't leave the Alsace unprotected. Lem suggests that 100 troops stay behind to protect the town. Nevertheless, that leaves Ellen's troops at a disadvantage of 3-1 in the fight. If Zion's troops were to reinforce themselves, Ellen and the gang still got bigger fish to fry. Meanwhile, back at the Theanadir's camp, Zion now looks like mashed potatoes after losing the fight. Not only that, he managed to escape with a scar sponsored by yours truly. How Zhcted soldiers arrived at Alsace remains the biggest mystery and blockbuster to Zion. In the mood for a comeback to the battle, Zion takes up an ancient, impenetrable brewing battle plan. The only difference and advantage per se is the addition of 2 dragons. Back at Alsace, everyone puts their hands together in preparation for a possible new attack. That aside, Tida makes a not-so-shocking confession. She inquires about Tigre's relationship with Ellen, and Ellen's response is as straightforward, dominating as possible. Now the battle begins fiercely, with Ellen and Tigre leading the battle frontline. Powerful combo, powerful duo. Both of them are quite skilled in their areas of specification, but then again, their opponent's trump card comes into game. The dragon spreads devastating terror on the battlefield, but it seems that Zhcted soldiers predicted this moment and had their trump card as well. Cavalry, headed by Lim, also arrives on the battlefield to get their share of the fight. This leaves Ellen to face the dragon one-on-one. Fascinating, she steps in as bold as ever. Handling a dragon weapon can be a crazy responsibility, and gotta admit, I'm scared for her. But then again, Ellen proves there's more to her than a pretty face and huge twin fountains. She unleashes a power so devastatingly fierce that it destroys one of the dragons in a single swing. Now the real fight begins, without any oversized intimidating beast. So much for the impenetrable Brunian battle plan. Every one of it so far has ended as a flop. The outcome makes Puss shiver in his boots. And by that, I mean Zion. He's so terrified that the idea of losing the second dragon might land him in deep shit he'll never recover from at Duke Theanadir's hands. With that, Zion orders a retreat to his entire army. But that's not enough to stop his opponents. Little by little, Zion's armies reduce in number as well as courage. The higher the reduction, the more the enemy advances, breaking each barricade of soldiers in Zion's defense. This reality makes poor Zion very, very, very mad. At this point, Tigre and Ellen have led numerous troops to the heart of Zion's army. Now, this is the part where both parties try to settle with dialogue instead of tearing themselves apart. It's a war, guys, and not a tea party or a therapy session. Just a quick breakdown of their dialogue that's possibly not gonna ever end the war. Zion calls Tigre a traitor for opening his arms to Zhcted troops and letting them into their land. Apparently, Zion and Tigre are both successors to towns in Brune, but greed struck the eyes of Zion's father, so he sent an unreliable source to conquer the mediocre Alsis, which is home to the Vorns. On Tigre's part, he simply is not going to sit back and watch Xion terrorize his people or destroy their properties. With that, Xion challenges Tigre to a duel. Not sure what the duel is about when they're heavily surrounded, but Tigre takes the offer. No need to guess what happens next, cause I'm about to tell you for being so loyal during this recap. Xion charges at Tigre, who then wields nothing but a bow. Although the duel looks disadvantageous for Tigre, he makes the best of his bow, shooting consecutively at Xion till it cracks his shield and pierces it through. Oh, the sweet sound of pain. The war takes another turn as both groups of armies charge at each other in defense of their respective party. No soon does Xion charge in the air while riding a flying dragon. Once again, he takes the easy route, boast about defeating an opponent, and then, when things get dirty, escape by yourself on the flying dragon. Xion easily chooses to go home rather than going hard. Ellen's sword ability can't reach that high, however. There's the revelation of something else. Turns out that Tigre's bow is alive? The bow speaks to him and tells him to shoot. Just shoot at the dragon, that's all. This is one big mystery, alright, and I'm a lover of some suspense. Tigre does as he's instructed, and then the next thing that happens, the bow reacts with Ellen's sword delivering a massive shot to the skies. This shot not only kills the dragon at a very high range, but it also takes Xion with him. Well, at least he dies in a grand style. I guess the war is over now with the army commander, Xion, dead. Now reality is what made the troops give up their resolve to continue fighting. Now, as we all know, this channel supports nothing but peace. After the war, peace reigns in Alsis. But then again, the occurrence of a competition to get Tigre's heart is about to thwart every definitive entity known as peace. One morning, Taida walks in on the method used to wake Tigre from his sleep. Best believe that she flares up at the outrageous method, what any charming lover would do. But then there's the crazy Ellen who shamelessly defends her action. Now, it's not even about the sword in his mouth for me, it's how their crotches were in very close contact during the act. If I were Taida, I'd initiate a restraining order on that man. Soon, Ellen sorts her bags, ready to journey back to Zet. Apparently, things over there require her vivid attention. Now, there's something scrumptious and juicy about this scene. Nah, it's probably the color of their attire. Watching them bounce all day is my hobby, not gonna lie. Gonna change my favorite color to blue while I'm at it. So that aside, Ellen leaves some troops to command and guard Alsis at Lim's order. Her reason remains the same. He's fascinated and has an out-of-the-ordinary power. Meanwhile, Taida makes a bold move on Tigre, but she presents this as a harmless stroll and is willing to follow him around town like his puppet. Behind the scenes, we get to see a bit of the evil taking place in Theonadir's camp. Not sure this guy mourned Xion or even shed a tear or felt remorse. He's on to the next plot, cooking dangerous schemes to get Tigre and Ellen for double-crossing him. Meanwhile, Ellen successfully arrives at Zhcted, and the first order of business is her submission to the king of Zhcted. Turns out the news flies faster than a rocket ship. Ellen's questioning requires a series of explanations. Why she carried Zhcted soldiers into battle in another territory, without permission even. The king promises to settle for a fine punishment for her reckless misconduct. Even her responses are absent of the word remorse. In other words, she'd do it again and again and again. One thing about this anime, you never run out of waifus with incredible milk factories. Just then, another Miss Big Boobie makes that shit wiggle, approaches the scene. Sophia. I'm sorry, but how does this old man remain focused on this eternal view? This should be illegal, man. It's too heavy on her. Let's take less than a timely second from this recap to appreciate the anime artist's good work. Now back to business. Sophia speaks in Ellen's defense and judges her actions coming home. Sophia describes the issue so smoothly that the king becomes somewhat attached. That aside, numerous injuries on the skin, numerous shows for side that evil doesn't exist. Later on, Ellen gets a proper introduction that also involves a little girl named Ludmilla. Ludmilla's arrival is enough proof that they're not to be seen as beautiful and intimate friends rather than the usual. It's up to Sophia's interference to bring a truce between both girls. Ludmilla does leave with one more banger on Ellen. She wonders how Tigre copes with her annoying attitude all day. Later on, Sophia gives Ellen some tea about the blue-haired Ludmilla. Apparently, the mini-demon is in cohorts with Duke Thenadir, whom she allegedly despises. The whole agenda of a partnership is just to retain her family's long-term relationship with Vanadis. Tigre and Tigre end up spending the day together, and then there's this awkward scene where they both wake up in a cottage. Goodness knows what these kids have been up to, especially Tigre and those emotional things she calls feelings. That aside, they return home after a busy day and find a surprise waiting for them. Masha's has returned home from his dealings, but he butts heads with a young and beautiful Lim. Can't blame him though, finding the Zhcted soldiers in his home is not one of his to-do lists. He apologizes and moves on to the next category, and that's asking Tigre what he plans to do with his life. Well, the answer is short and simple. Tigre's next move is to launch a full-blown attack on Duke Vanadis. Blood wasn't kidding when he said nobody messes with his people. Afterward, Masha's heads to the capital to seek an audience with the King of Brune. It won't be so bad to inform him about the events about to happen since Duke Vanadis struck first. Meanwhile, Tigre uses this time to journey to each empire in Brune seeking an alliance for the war he's about to start. But then again, the feedback from Ellen's visit to the king leaves Tigre hanging for a while when Ellen presents the king's demands. Zhcted's interference in the war will be on the condition that Alsace becomes an asset for the Zhcted kingdom. In other words, their rights become engulfed and swallowed totally by Zhcted. This was just the king's way of making sure he benefited from the war no matter what the outcome would be. Deep down, I think he's quite aware of what happens when you go against Duke Vanadis. That aside, according to the hierarchy in the kingdom, the 7 war maidens come after the king's position because, to be fair, nobility can't stage a fight with them even if they tried. This leads Ellen to announce the only problem they might encounter in their endeavor, and that is the cooperation of the war maidens, especially Ludmilla. Ludmilla is introduced in this scene as a war maiden and the wielder of the cleaning spear. She opts for a horse ride to who knows where, a place called Rodnik. On the way, Ludmilla makes it known that Duke Vanadis has accomplices outside Brune, and that includes herself. Clearly, Tigre has no business going after a man who is way out of his league. They don't ride far off when they find themselves caught in the web of an assassin attack. The target is easy, of course. Having Tigre out of the way will be a big help to Vanadis. Sadly, Lim gets caught in a dangerous situation after being bitten by a snake. The next scene shocks me to the core of my being, guys. Tigre takes a grab hold of Lim's juicy apples and takes a sucking bite. Ludmilla also aids in the fight by using her ice element spear to deal final damage to the goons. After administering first aid to Lim, Tigre rides with Ellen to the place called Rodnik. With that, this recap has come to an end, and you're a pretty interesting guy for sticking around. Don't forget to hit the bell icon as well as the subscribe button for more recaps like this. See you thirsty weebs later.